What's up, dudes? Welcome to Villains and Bros, Knowing Your Voice with Andrew Love. My name is Andrew Love, and I play a lot of villains and bros. And that is, so let's take it back just a second. When becoming an actor, you're very hungry and you want to play whatever you can possibly play. But there are limitations to what you can and cannot play. And so one of the things that can help you initially, if you want to move forward in acting, is kind of understanding what your capabilities are. Now that's not to say that you can't learn new skills. And in fact, I encourage you to take acting classes if that's something that you're interested in. But specifically in voice acting, you want to understand where you're at vocally, because people can't see you. And that's a great thing. I mean, not that you should be seen. Hey, come on, guys.
You said.
But the idea is that, you know, obviously well, it's not obvious to some people, but whatever, I'm 5'11"-ish. I'm not gonna play a super giant on stage because that just, it doesn't read. But to animation, using your voice, you can play a whole plethora of different characters. But you have to understand where your voice kind of sits, because one thing that you'll recognize right away is that, so because I have a deeper voice, I'm not going to play children. I learned that very early on. I had an audition for Loki, Magical Detective, and I was going to audition for Loki. I don't know if anyone knows that show. It's fairly old, but anyways, it's obviously not going to work, because what tends to be the case more often, there are actors out there that do character voices, and they, you know, all over the map and all that stuff. But for the most part, what directors are looking for is a voice that is natural and fits a character. And they don't want you to have to strain too hard in what your voice is. So it's generally just a variance of where your voice naturally sits. Now, there are other people, or there are specific actors that can do, as I said, like a Mel Blanc or Mel Blanc, Monica Rial, you know, that they're just all over the map. But for most people, especially when you're trying to do this, it's good to identify that. Ways to do that is, one of the ways to do that is to listen to your voice and become incredibly comfortable in hearing your voice, because it's awkward. I don't think your voice is awkward, but everyone thinks their own voice is awkward when hearing it back, and it's like, wow, I sound like that? I thought I had, because in your head, it's different. And so that's a very, very good first step in kind of knowing where your highs and lows are, recording your voice, seeing how natural it feels, to kind of give it maybe a little stuff up here, see, it's just up here, I can get there. Or if I need to, I can go down here. And once you find your range, then you can start kind of, and I suggest this as much, I can't stress this enough. Read out loud, read everything you can, because, and just start reading. Because that's a lot of the times the way that it is when you go into the booth. You don't have the luxury always of seeing the material before you get a chance to record it. So you're reliant upon the director's direction or a general, what they used to call them cliff notes, or a Wikipedia synopsis of like, okay, so you're a professor, you've got a demon living inside of you, there's a girl in class who's actually your daughter, but you can't reveal that you're her father because the demon will come out and kill her. So this is the first time you're in class. Okay, go. And that's kind of, you have to take that information and immediately be comfortable with that, and then read stuff that you've never seen before. And that's not to say that you can't mess up or make mistakes. in that initial cold read, but you have to be able to put those sentences together, just at the very least, because if you can't do that, then it slows down the whole process. And that whole thing about time being money in anime is an incredible maxim. Time is money. The way that things are moving forward now, it used to be a situation where it was, they would air in Japan, and then the whole series, after it had been completed, would then be bought and then translated and then recorded and then released, sometimes 2 years after it had aired, sometimes much longer. Some dubs have never been, or some subs have never been dubbed. But now, as we're moving progressively towards more streaming type of services, you're seeing a shift in anime, and so that process is becoming faster and faster. So that time is money is very important. So if you can take the time on your own end to do this work, when you go in for your audition, you will have a leg up on other people who don't know these things, because it's very hard to get back in after that initial kind of plane wreck or plane crash of trying to do your audition and not maybe feeling comfortable. And if you're not comfortable with the way you sound, you start thinking about it. And if you're in your head, then you're not thinking about the script or thinking about the emotions that you need to give. And it comes across, it sounds half of what it could be. So a lot of, and this sounds like a self-help seminar, I'm gonna put you to sleep too with my voice, you watch. It's in that middle day, and you've had your lunch, and everyone's, no. Oh God, what was I talking about?
First audition.
Yeah, getting your tools. So knowing your voice, knowing your highs and lows, knowing what is sustainable, making sure that what you're saying is clear and understandable. That's another thing. I have a very, once you get into kind of mechanics of acting, and if you really go deep in, you can go, into specific musculature in your soft palate. But that's something I actually have a problem with, is we got a lazy soft palate, so I sound like mumbling. So one of the ways that I do that, get some water. Forgive me for this, but one of the ways that I help myself become more understandable and clear is that, because it opens up the back of my throat, and sometimes I have to do that, and really scratching out your mouth, especially if you were, another way for lifting that soft palate, they can set the lines with the tongue out, and then when you put your tongue back in, it becomes more crisp, and you can hit those consonants and vowels and things. So, knowing some of, when I was starting out, I kind of had to figure out what it was that my strengths were as a trial and error process, because I didn't do this work beforehand. I had done it in theater. I mean, I went to the University of Houston. I got my BA in acting and directing. I feel that if you want to be an actor, then you should study acting. That is not to say that people aren't talented on their own. Plenty of people can, or not plenty, but there are people that are exceptions to the rule in most cases, as you hear me say in a lot of examples. But if you want to do this, if you want to be serious about this, taking an acting class is the next step, because it's about timing. If you're in the booth and you can read really well, but you're not able to label or cover the words with the emotion that is necessary, because some of these shows, I mean, you see them, and it's your first line could be like, "No, don't do that!" And sorry, that was loud. And so you have to be able to get that emotion out. And if you are comfortable with your voice and you can read, but you don't have the ability to apply the correct emotion, then that's another step, because then the director has to keep on cueing you to be, well, it's more like this, or it's more like that. Or it can be to the point where I want you to say it specifically like this. And that's something that, as an actor, I mean, I've been doing this for 13 years, but there are times when a director can say stuff like that, and I'll start sweating, going, I'm not supposed to be here. And like, you know, feeling like a complete fraud or an imposter. When it's not true. It's just being, understanding that at the end of the day, the director is trying to sell a product, and we're all working towards the same goal. And if they're giving you notes and adjusting, then it's to give the show what it needs. And you have to be able to adjust to those things and know what the director's talking about to expedite that process. Going back to time is money. You don't want to rush through things, but you don't want to pull more time, because if you don't take enough time for your session, then the next person coming in, it might cause them to be bumped, and now you've bumped the whole day. Or they have to call you back in, and which means that they have to find more space for you to come back in. It happens, but you don't want that to be your modus operandi, because you'll be replaced. You know, clean and simple, or plain and simple. So I'll talk about some of my voices that I have done and try and place where I got them. Because another thing in doing your research and knowing your voice is seeing who is comparable to you. Like, what do you kind of sound like? And looking at those characters, whether they be cartoons, movie, TV, news, your neighbor, or whatever. Mimicking them and trying to capture that can also be things that you can take and use in your own repertoire when you're trying to do stuff. So, who here has seen Parasite? Okay, awesome, great show. I play Uragami in the show, and he's the serial killer. And I don't think I'm spoiling anything, but he has the ability to sense who is a parasite and who is not a parasite, because he's a sick, twisted killer. So when I went into the audition, as they were explaining it to me, it kind of reminded me of the Joker. And so if you listen to it, there you go, buddy. Killing Joker, by the way. Very good. My Uragami is somewhere in between Heath Ledger's Joker and Jack Nicholson's Joker. If you listen to it, I get so nervous about saying lines. My name's Uragami, and I'm here to show you a little bit about what we do. So, like, I mean, that's straight up Ledger's Joker, the variance and the pitches, and then the gravel in the bottom, and maybe hanging on certain consonants. Let's see, Akainu from One Piece. Do you guys know who that is? Okay. It's straightly, or it's almost a Batman voice, a Christian Bale Batman. I am Akainu. Yeah, he sounds like this. And so, I mean, everything I watch potentially becomes something that I could mimic or take with me. And I don't think of it as stealing as much as it's not. It's about, like, it's like music. And in music, there are only so many phrases on the keyboard. Now, there's a lot of them, but there are only so many. And so you'll hear a musical phrase in one song. I mean, like, freaking Louie Louie and Wild Thing and other examples. But it's very similar, and so for me, it's about taking a phrase maybe and applying it to another piece of music, or it's like sampling. You know, you can take a song and take a clip and redo that and then reverse it, and it's something else. And that's not saying that the first wasn't as good or that this is bad that you're doing. It's just different, and it's creating a different mix. Because regardless of who I'm imitating, it's still my voice, and it's never going to be the exact thing. Let's do some bros. So you'll have to forgive me, and I'm going to try and say this, and Kyle, you can help me if I forget. Naotsgou? Is that close?
Close.
What? How do you say it?
Naotsgou.
Naotsgou.
But real fast.
Naotsgou.
There you go.
This is embarrassing, and I want to admit this to you all. I have a problem saying Japanese names. More often than not, they'll cut them out and they'll put in a buddy and a pal or a hey dude. I try really hard, and that's something that I have an opportunity to work on because it's a big part of what we do. Okay, so anyways, Naotsgou is from Log Horizon, and he's kind of like this, and he loves panties, and that to me is, I mean, did you guys ever see Bill and Ted?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, that's something strange is afoot at the Circle K. Like it's a little bit of Ted, and it's actually, no, this is an older movie, but Fast Times at Ridgemont High. A little Spicoli. Oh, yeah, Mr. Hand. And these are things that, as a kid, I would do these voices just because I just, like my friends and I joking around, were things that we like to joke about. And I guess that's another thing, is that joking around can be another way to practice your stuff, because it's like, I use this metaphor or analogy so much, but I never do it myself. It's like working out. Okay, so working out, if you go in and you compare yourself to people that are buff, that's unfair, because they put the time and the effort in to do this stuff. You can't compare yourself to that. So you need to focus on yourself. But I will say that the more that you do, the stronger that you become. So just like your other muscles, your acting muscles, you flex them in your speaking muscles by doing it. So again, taking a class, maybe looking at community theater, maybe picking up a book and recording it like an audio book or podcast or something like that. Just any time you can use those voices or things, you'll find the stuff that tends to be stronger, and you can start honing in on that and focusing in on that. So that if you do have a situation where it's an audition or you're called in to do this and they're like, well, he's kind of a bro dude, you're like, I got that. This character from Log Horizon is very similar to Daigo in Food Wars. If you guys know Food Wars, great show. It's very hard for me to watch and not eat. I have to have something. And they're always like, there's something about cartoon food that, oh God, I wish I could eat it. It looks so good. But he's, saying here, like, oh, dude, you can't do that. And that's a mixture of the deep and the high. So he can be down here, but then he can be like, wait, to pop it up. And that'll give it a variance, so that it's not all one note. Some characters you can play that way, a lot of like stoic dudes who don't say much. Sure, I'll do that. But you want to have some type of variance in the way that you say things, depending on the character, so that it doesn't become flat. So that you can tell when someone's just reading a thing and they're not really kind of putting that extra sauce. Akio is kind of a bro dude from Clannad, but it's more of a closer version to my voice. But there are times when it is a little heightened to be more bro duty. But that actually is a closer example. Like have you guys seen Clannad? Do you know what I'm talking about? Yes, okay. You four will know exactly what I'm talking about. It just kind of is my voice, and I don't have to put much on. It just the heightened situation of like, no, I love your bread. No, okay. And that is, it makes it so much easier when it is just kind of your natural timbre, because you're comfortable in it, you know. And then. Achan from Haven't You Heard? I'm Sakamoto. Do you guys know this? I really like that show so much. I love that show. Anytime people are just like, no, I got him this time. Oh, I got him. And then they never do. If you haven't seen that, Haven't You Heard? I'm Sakamoto. It's very, very, very funny. And my character is kind of a mixture of a bad guy and a bro dude, because he's kind of a bully. But that would be somewhere a mixture of origami and Daigo. It's somewhere in between. Ugh! Sakamoto, I'll get you. I guess that's how I would do this panel. I'm not really sure. I created it, but that's probably been like 10 minutes. No.
No, it's been 15.
Okay, great.
Oh, it's been 20.
Yeah, I covered a lot of that. Let's start some questions, and then I'll probably talk some more. Yes, sir.
So I actually have a question for you. What is your take on direction as a whole? Like, whenever you've gotten direction from a director, what would be that you think is like good direction versus like bad direction, where it's like takes 9 to 10 takes to finally get it from the director? Something like that, for example.
That's a great question.
Yeah, tell us, Andrew.
Oh, by the way, we get a ringer on the audience. This is Kyle Jones. He's an ADR director. God, so many things, but from what I've said, Lock Rising, Parasite, Food Wars, Haven't You Heard? I'm Sakamoto, Devil's Line, Made in Abyss right now. God, what else?
You're Tonagawa.
Oh, Tonagawa, Mr. Tonagawa, yeah. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen the dub, but no, that is. I've seen the sub. It's
Okay.
excellent.
Well, if you do watch the dub, it's on High Dive right now, and I play Yamazaki, who's one of the suits around the table. So, anyways, back to your question about direction. Every director is different, and so there's an adaptability in this. That's a great question for this panel, because it goes back to knowing your voice and being able to acclimate or adapt to what your director is giving you. I would say, I don't think I've ever had a situation where it was bad direction, or that I felt that I was like, oh, forget this. There have been times where I didn't feel like I was up to par, meaning, like saying Japanese names. But as far as good directors generally will give you a good synopsis, will give you a feel of what you're going into, the way that they articulate how they want you to get what they want. I guess a bad director, if they didn't have patience with you, that would be kind of frustrating, because it's like, I'm trying to read your mind, but I don't, I can't read your mind, so let me try this. But most every person, as I said, it's hard for me to think of a bad experience, but everyone gives you a good synopsis. Some directors like to give you line reads, as I said, where it's like, I want you to say it just like this, or give it to me like, no, I don't want to. Or, no, I don't want to. Or, specific like that. Some actors hate that. I love it, because it's like, you want that? Great.
Yeah.
that's exactly what you want, I'm gonna try and give it to you, because at the end of the day, it's all about the product. You want the product to be the best for the Japanese, the licensors, you want it to be best for the company that you're working for, and you want it to be best for the fans. If I'm gonna be really honest with you, you want it to be best for the fans first and foremost, and then everybody else can follow suit. Does that answer your question?
It does, because like over time when I've done projects, it's the whole like, I've been told from different people that whenever the director wants you to be like, no, say it more like, no, like this. And it's like, they say that's kind of not good, because then it's like, they're taking away what the
Your
actor
process.
or actress is trying to bring to
I
the
take
table.
that counter argument, but again, for me, the way that I operate, and other actors may be different, I feel that if the director is directing it, then I want to listen to it. Now, if they're like micromanaging every step you do, it's like, well, why don't you play it? You know? But just creating a good dialogue between the director, and if that's what the way they want to work, then you're like, okay, cool. May I try this? That's another thing you can do, is may I try this if it's something different. Now, you can't do that every line. You got to pick your battles, but that's also something that if it's kind of shifty. Yes, sir.
How do you take care of your voice?
Man, I'm not a good person.
How should you not take care of your voice?
Do what I do. I would say you don't want to scream a lot. You could shred your vocal cords, and then you're not going to be able to do that. If you're having to really strain here in your throat, that can be bad. Drinking water is the key to life. Our bodies are full of it. And I mean, you look at almost anything, you're like, oh, this diet, make sure you're drinking lots of water. You sick? Drink water, you know? Like, you're unhappy? Have you had any water? You can't sleep? You know, all that. I think I said that already. Anyways, tea is good. Certain teas, honey. Honey is very good. If you've got bad allergies, a secret trick is finding local honey, because local honey will have the allergens in the area, and you can use that and it should help you. Mucinex is a great thing for actors. Flonase, another good thing. Throat coat. Ricolas. Everyone's all like, God, I wish just anything. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Yes. Yes.
I just wanted to make sure.
Absolutely.
What would you say to someone, like, advice-wise, who's trying to do voice acting to kind of get their foot in the door? Like, what would be the best thing for them to do? Like, to find auditions, to, like, get an audition and to hold that audition so that they can try and push themselves forward into voice acting?
Well, you got to know your area. If you're looking to do anime, there's Dallas, there's Houston, there are a couple places in between. There are places in LA. So, you know, they're not going to want to fly you out there. They're going to want you to be ready and available. And I got to say, living in Houston, there have been numerous times where I'm like, I want to move, I want to try something different. But if I do this, my proximity to the studio could potentially affect what roles I can be cast in, because out of sight, out of mind. And that's not to say you can't be called in for something special or whatever, but they're not going to try and get someone, because it becomes a big hassle. It's like if you don't live there, then that you got to think about, like if I go to Dallas to record, they try and build in a certain amount of hours so that it makes it worth the trip. Because if I go up for 30 minutes, that's 9 hours in a car for 30 minutes, you know, back and forth. Not 18 hours, 4.5 one way, 4.5 the back. Yes. And so I would say, if you're interested in doing this, first and foremost, have your tools, know your voice, have some acting and understand all of that. But once you've got that secured, then start looking at their websites, SentaiFilmworks.com, Funimation, whatever. I think it's Funimation.com. I'm sorry, I don't know that one off the top of my head. I should. But look, and they'll have open castings. Then also in Houston, I know that they did this thing called the Alliance Auditions. And what that is where you have an opportunity. So it would be like if every one of you ran a theater or were a representative from a studio or a talent agency, and you would see one person come in at a time and you'd get to audition for all of these at once. And Sentai will do that sometimes, and so you can audition there. A lot of the times they pull from theater groups, and word of mouth. So if you're doing a play in town of one of those studios and someone works at goes in to record, and they're like, hey, I got a lot of guys in this, or I got a lot of girls in this next show. Do you happen to know anybody? Or like, oh yeah, I was doing this play with this one dude, blah, 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 blah. You give them the information and then they'll call them in. But I would say if you're not in the community of acting, whatever, and you want to kind of get your foot in the door, the first way would be looking on the websites. And I'm reluctant to say this because not everyone is like me, but talking to someone who's in the business sometimes, not pushing yourself like, hey, I'm doing this, and why can't you get this for me? You're like, whoa, dude, I didn't know you. Hold on. But talking to people and it's like, hey, I'm interested in this. Sometimes you can network and make connections. Like I met a guy downstairs who is an independent game developer, and he's worked with a couple of anime actors and stuff. And so just meeting him, I was like, hey, yeah, I would be interested in doing this. So here's my card, let me know. Those can be good ways. But I say that I'm reluctant to do that because some voice actors don't want you talking to them when they're not like up here. And I don't agree with that, but I also have to respect that's their wishes. Maybe, they just kind of want to be left alone. But good ways are networking in an acting community, and then looking at the websites for posts about general auditions. Do
you think radio would count as well as like theater? Because I know that there's a program in one of the community colleges around here that's like a radio show almost, or like they do like radio stuff.
You have experience using your voice and being recorded. That would be a really good way.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. You and then you. Yes, sir. Oh, did you not? Oh, you did. Okay. Yes.
How many takes do you think is a safe or healthy amount? Like, when I tend to do recordings, I kind of get in, like, if I don't get it after like the first or second one, I start getting impatient with myself. How many times would you do a take and say that's like a healthy, like a good amount to do it?
I for the most part don't. Well, that's not true because I audition at home and. Most recently for video game stuff, and I'll read it a couple of times before I record it, just out loud, kind of find out where I want to go, and then I'll record and I'll be like, nope. And I'll be like, that sounds pretty good, and then I'll try and do another one after that. But I would say, much like writing, like if you're writing a book, which I'm not a writer, so I have it's not like I've got this experience of listening. But if you're writing a book, they say that you just continue, because if you keep on going back, you'll never finish your story.
Yep.
And so I would say if you can't get it after 5 or 6 takes, maybe circle back around, come back to it.
Okay.
Because that's another way you can get fresh eyes. Move forward, and then maybe whatever you're doing kind of leads you to the place that you needed to be to say what you're going to say. But if you're going beyond 10 times, you should probably take a break, get something to drink, look at a book, I don't know.
Watch anime.
Have a bit of a cry.
So, when you were mentioning all of the places from which you drew inspiration, they were all live action films. Are there other times when you've drawn inspiration from other animated or video game works, other things that are voice acting?
Oh yeah, I mean, Batman the Animated Series is my absolute favorite television show of all time. Second is Twilight Zone. I so much from that, and Mel Blanc was a huge inspiration to me as a kid. When I found that out at like 6 or 7, that he did so many voices, my mind was blown, and I wanted to do that. I didn't know that I would end up doing a form of that, but that was really important. Phil Hartman, The Simpsons, holy jeez. I mean, all of that. In fact, Kyle and I were sharing an elevator, and I was telling him, or right before, whatever, is that, have you guys seen My Love Story?
Yes.
Okay, have you seen the dub of it? Okay. He directed it, and I play Takeo, and Takeo is a little bit of Milhouse's dad. Takeo, can I borrow a feeling? And so I do draw from so many things, in different styles, and even jokes. Sometimes joke voices I'll take away from like Mystery Science Theater when they'll do like, oh yeah, that's a real great thing. You know, just like that kind of like 40s thing might apply somewhere. So you never know. And even listening to people in, you know, regular day things, I mean, living here in Texas, you don't have to travel far to find somebody who's got all the stories in the world to tell. And I got this truck and all these cattle. And you can listen to it and you're like, I'm filing that away. So yeah. Next.
So, I'm not entirely sure how to phrase this one, but how would you say the rules of voice acting change for something that is self-made?
I don't think they don't. Or, I mean, it just depends on how you want to record it. And what do you mean by rules? Like,
I guess
or like what parameters are you talking about?
I guess the guidelines more of what you're trying, what you should watch out for, because one of the biggest things I'm noticing between auditioning and creating something of your own is that you don't have the same feedback loop.
Yes, that's true. Well, I mean, again, practice makes perfect. In doing it and then, you know, showing people, and if it's self-made, you got to be kind of careful on who you show because you don't want it to go away from you. But having people that you feel give constructive criticism as opposed to just like, that sucks. It's like, well, that doesn't help me. Maybe talking to somebody that you think is like, I don't know, if you know a director or someone that does this, it's like, what about this? What is this? And they might be able to give you pointers. And again, it's about being comfortable, because a lot of the trendsetters that we see, people that we enjoy as artists, they kind of follow their own rules. They're like, this is my style. And it might not fit within your parameters, but I don't care. And then at a certain point, people just go, that style's cool. I want to be like that. It's like, they just did their own thing and they kept at it. That's another thing, it's just that this is not easy. It can be very, very challenging. There are really talented actors who come into the booth and can't do this. Theater actors, because they're putting their voice to the back of the room, and on the stage it really makes sense, but in the booth it sounds like an announcer or a superhero when it's like a really calm show. It doesn't apply. So just keep that in mind, that it is challenging, and so you will face these obstacles, but your perseverance and your tenacity when it comes to your own work and your projects, if you're able to see it through, people will follow that idea, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone. That's probably the caveat, I should say.
Yeah.
Next question. Yes.
What type of voice do you think is probably like the hardest to emulate, in your opinion?
Girls.
Broad question.
The opposite gender?
Girls.
I mean, there have been instances where, in just like theatrical work, I haven't had many times in anime where I've had to play a woman. I don't think that's correct for me to do that, but if the show called for it, fine. But I would say kids. Kids are really hard for me because my voice isn't there. I'll give you a prime example. This is actually a better answer to that question. Medaka Box. If anyone has seen Medaka Box, the dub of it,
Yes.
there's a story of this, and I don't want to sell myself short, but I was not the first pick for the leader, the
Zenkichi.
Yes, Zenkichi. I was not the first pick. Chris Patton was. And if you know Chris Patton's voice, he and I are not similar. We're just in, he's this, or I'm this. And so then it was like Chris Patton couldn't do it. And then Adam Gibbs couldn't do it. And then somebody else couldn't do it. And they were like, okay, you're gonna do this. And I was like, and in the show, as we know from watching anime, and this is something that you can do. I'm glad you brought this up. In knowing your voice, when you listen to the Japanese, you hear a certain tone, and you want your voice to be kind of similar to whatever that tone is for your character. So if you're comfortable with your voice and you're watching a dub, and you're like, I think I could do that. A good way to practice it is watch the scene that you want to do, write out that character's lines, the translations, and then rewind it with the stuff down, and maybe with your phone, voice memo or GarageBand, which is what I use. Try and say those lines. And that, to kind of give you an idea of what it would be like to do through the process of recording. Sorry, my head. I get on this topic and then it immediately just goes, whoa, and I have no idea what I was just talking about. His voice in Medaka Box is not my tone. And so the entire process, I was really trying to push my voice up here and make this natural, but it still has a forced kind of effort. And so I would say that was the most difficult, or that's the most difficult for me, is trying to be that slightly younger tone of voice. In the question. Yes.
What exactly would you say to an aspiring voice actor, somebody who's just starting and really wants to get into a career?
It depends on where you're at. So, did you just walk in, or have you been here the entire time?
I just walked in.
Okay, great. Well, what I had said earlier was no. That's a good reiteration question. I'll run with it. So, knowing your voice, where your highs and lows are, being comfortable with it, controlling it, and not being anxious if you mess up something. Those are good steps to have if you're interested in doing this, because that's even before you get into a studio. Because once you get into a studio, you don't have time to think about all that other stuff. You need to have it taken care of. So once you have that stuff, and I would say if you haven't had acting classes, take at least one to get familiarized, or familiarize yourself with emotions and how to activate them for the lines so that you can easily say it. And then also read out loud, read everything you can, because you never know what you're going to have to go into the booth and say, and so you want to be okay with just reading something off the fly, or cold reading as it's called. And then once you feel comfortable with those things, you will look at websites of the companies that you potentially want to work for if you're in that area. or want to submit some auditions, but you have to be willing to drive to wherever you're going to go. You know, that's the thing is you don't want to waste anybody's time because time is money, and specifically in anime. I think that's a pretty good recap of what I talked about today. And then also, oh dude, oh bro, Batman. Okay, next question? Yeah.
As regard to recording from your home, what types of microphones do you recommend?
I have a Snowball, and I think it's made by Blue Note. You know, in picking, I have somehow stumbled. Thank you guys for showing up. Have a good con. If you see me, stop me and say hello. If you want to take pictures and autographs or whatever. And thanks again for coming to the panel. Didn't mean to see what you got.
Snowball.
Snowball. Yeah, snowballing down. Spiraling out.
Blue brand likes.
My life.
Snowball 2019.
You want, look, you get what you pay for. So if you want to spend a lot of money, then that's going to be an amazing microphone, but you might not know how to use it. I looked at kind of the next step up from just like your basic mic and looked at Amazon reviews and see, you know, how people responded to it, how many stars. And, I mean, you just do kind of a search. It's like, hey, I'm a voice actor, or best mics for starting out. And that can give you a good starting place. Yes.
Have you ever been familiar with maybe like a show that was brought over beforehand and you got a role in it, and during the localization a character was kind of changed? And have you ever like struggled with kind of voicing that character in the way the direction wanted?
No. I have not run into that yet. Because as I said, it's very rare that I or actors have the opportunity to see the show. I was very fortunate in both My Love Story and Parasite to watch the show prior to. And I didn't feel... My Love Story was kind of interesting because I was really excited about it, but I was also super nervous because again, it's playing a high school student. Even though he's a big dude, I was nervous. And because there was a lot of pressure on the licensors, is that correct? I don't know, to kind of get the right voice for it. Right. And I think I auditioned for it twice, or went through a round. I was pretty high up on the list because of what I do, the normal voices that I do, but I've not had that particular instance. I would say that when I was watching My Love Story and then performing it, it changed a little bit from how because I didn't have the voice initially. And then once we started doing it, I felt much more at ease. But it's not been a situation where I was like, it's actually like this. No. Yeah. Yes.
How do you keep track of all your voices?
I don't. God, I don't. It's embarrassing. There have been times, oh man, an embarrassing moment. There was a girl dressed up from a show that I had done, and wanted to get my autograph. She's like, "What do you think?" I'm like, "It's great." She's like, "But don't you know who I am?" No. Oh, I'm in this. I was like, "Oh, okay." She's like, "That's me." I was like, "Oh, shit. Oh no." And I just felt so bad because here's something to know. We don't get to watch the shows all the time. Beforehand, but then even afterwards. If we're lucky enough to get a copy, then we might be able to watch it. But we only record when our characters speak. So we don't see other characters talking about them. We don't see them die off screen or whatever. The director will tell us about that. But, you know, I go in and I record a character for 10, 11 hours. I don't see the rest of the show. and then I have no context of what has happened beyond that initial recording. And then I also do a lot of theater because I've got a deep voice, and this kind of ties back in. You might not always have a spot. The shows that they get, like when they get shows that it's like, it's all a bunch of high school girls. It's like, well, unless there's a teacher. So you have to be comfortable with not being cast in a while and not think that, oh, I really screwed the pooch, or this is bad, or sometimes it could be, but generally it's just the shows that they have. It's what they need, and if you're not good or you're not for that, then whatever. But when I'm not doing anime, I perform regularly. I'm a part of a classical theater company that does plays that are 100 years old or older. In fact, my mustache is a little predominant right now because I didn't want to shave my beard because I have to have a mustache for Watson. I'm playing Watson in The Return of Sherlock Holmes. In Houston, if you guys want to come see it, it'll be in October. What was I talking about? Acting, theater, voices. What was it? What was the question? Oh. I think that answers your question. Yeah, so again, my track was, I'm not just bragging about, oh, I do theater, no. You have to commit to so many words in your head and characters, and a new character comes out, and when it's like building a building or doing construction. It's like you build a building, now it's done, you move on. It's like you learn the play, you do the play, now it's over, and you move on. Yeah.
Would you recommend, I mean, obviously doing both is good, but open casting versus having a demo reel? Or, I mean, both is good. But.
I'm not the person. I to this day do not have a demo reel, and I have recently started piecing together lines from auditions I've been doing to kind of collect my voices to know what I can do. And good segue, guys. Way to work together. Yeah, it's a way of knowing it, because again, you got to know your voice. And you're asking me, well, you're keeping track of them. It's like, I know that I can do villains and bro dudes, but I need to be a little more specific for certain variations of those. And so having that demo is good, because it's like I'm a product. And okay, this is the last question, by the way. Knowing your product, and so you can submit that out, and that's your chance to be like, the best of the best. Yes.
Oh, so has there been a character that you've done where you look at that character and it's like you connect with them, and it's like that could be me in
Takeo.
What?
Takeo from My Love Story. I am a mixture between Takeo and Akio from Clannad. I'm a very goofy person, as you guys can see. I love trying to help and do the right thing. It's very important to me. I get very sentimental about that. Sometimes I'll be nice to a fault and put myself in a precarious position. I'm not precarious, but sacrifice myself to help others. And so I would say the two that I most relate to would be a mixture of Akio and Takeo. Well, I guess that's the end of that. Okay, well, I've got about 5 minutes. Thank you so very much for coming. I hope it was informative. Please, if you see me in the halls, don't be afraid to stop. I'll take pictures. I'll sign pretty much anything. I have a few things that I've brought that if you want to purchase, you can. But I don't require anyone to purchase my signature or anything like that. Also, if you guys want to tweet, you can tag me at Andrew Love VA, I think.
I love to Twitter right now and double check. I like got it written down somewhere.
Yeah, Andrew Love VA. And I want to say thank you to everyone that watches anime. Because if you did not do that, then I would not be here. So thank you very much for coming out. Thank you for supporting the con. Thank you for watching. Doesn't matter if it's dubbed or subbed, I don't care. Just watching is great. Thank you so much. I have a signing in about 30 minutes in room 3, something. Third floor.